As the non-conference schedule wraps up soon for many teams around the country, Mark Zanetto of Locked On UConn is here to discuss last night's UConn game versus Notre Dame, the season so far, as well as the start of Big East play for the Huskies on Sunday and more. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On NBA newsletter. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. If this is your first time listening to Locked On Women's Basketball, welcome. We at The Next have over 100 reported pieces every single month. We have a beat reporter on every single WNBA team, one on more than 15 different NCAA beats, so get that YouTube subscription up. And you can also support us by subscribing to The Next for $9 a month or $72 a year at thenexthoops.com. So today we'll be talking about last night's UConn game versus Notre Dame, the season so far, as well as the start of Big East play for the Huskies coming up on Sunday and more. Joining me today is the host of Locked On UConn, Mark Zanetto. Before we dive in, how long have you been hosting Locked On UConn, and how did you get started?
No, thank you for having me. I've been a lifelong fan of both the women's and men's basketball programs. Growing up in Connecticut, I grew up in Meriden. I lived there until about 15 years ago. I moved down to North Carolina. My family's in Connecticut and New York. UConn basketball is something of a religion in our household. I tell people that the movie Rudy, where they depict the football love of that, is kind of how UConn is viewed in our house. So about 9 months ago, I reached out to Locked On UConn, their email contact us page, because they didn't have a Locked On UConn channel, and a friend of mine was doing something else for them. And 9 months later, here we are.
Awesome. Well, diving right in, Notre Dame defeated UConn 79-68 last night. What did you learn from the result, and kind of what are your takeaways?
I think last night it was just one of these things. You have a night without Azzi. Paige Bueckers is as good as she is, and she's great. But we learned that you need more than her to just win against a top 5 team in the country. And make no mistake about it, Notre Dame is a top 5 club. Don't be fooled by that number 8 ranking. They had a couple of two kind of weird losses this year, but that is 100% what I took away from last night.
And then, what do you think the team will be able to learn from this game and kind of take moving forward, not only in Big East play, but they still have a couple of big non-conference matchups, as they usually do, coming up as well later this year and early next year?
Yeah, it's just to me last night it was interesting because for the first time this year they've had lapses against the teams that are lesser than, like Holy Cross or Fairleigh Dickinson. But I felt like there was a lack of intensity last night on the defensive side. You had mental lapses, playing defense, going under screens on Hannah Hidalgo, which is a huge no-no. And it was always at points where it led to big momentum shifts for Notre Dame. And that was a crushing moment for UConn fans, because every time you clawed back, I think Gino had a quote last night that said, when you claw back into games, it takes so much out of you. It like sucks the life out of you. And last night was a perfect example of that. It felt like we're always kind of going uphill, but a lot of it was self-inflicted, also by Hannah Hidalgo.
Yeah. On the other side of things, who impressed you last night or stood out to you?
I think the trio of Notre Dame players last night, to kind of essentially take it away from the UConn side, Paige always impresses me. I mean, she has 25 points, and it was like a quiet 25. She always seems to have big numbers. But Hannah Hidalgo, like, how could you not go there? 29 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. And she's 5'6". It's incredible to me. Like, a microcosm of that game is her getting 10 rebounds with as big a players as UConn has. And that just shows her heart and determination. And I didn't feel the same energy from UConn last night. And that to me was a big issue.
And then, did anything else stand out to you? I know you've talked about a couple things, either positive or negative.
Yeah, I think on the positive side, I think Caitlin Chen stepped up a few times during the game. She had 11 points, but hit a few big runners as they were trying to claw back, and she played solid defense. But Gino has been calling for Paige to be more aggressive. And I know she had 25 last night, and she did it in the quietest way possible. I said to one of our beat reporters, Maggie Vanoni, she's shooting 61% from the floor, probably a little less after last night. But I want her to shoot more. Like if she was closer to 50%, but was more of a volume shooter in this season in particular, I've talked about her trying to be like, she quotes Kobe Bryant all the time. I want her to be Mamba Paige instead of efficient Paige, right? And some would argue that others have to step up. And I think two things can be true. I think, when we see others not stepping up, like Ashlyn Shade had a tough night last night. I think Paige has to take over completely.
Yeah. She's still shooting 56% from the floor, lower than her career average, 38% from three.
Right.
But definitely a quiet night for her last night. I just you mentioned Maggie Vanoni. She tweeted out some stats that her and Carl Ademic found. What do you think of none of the Huskies' 10 available players having ever played Notre Dame in South Bend? And then, also for the fourth straight season, UConn has played Notre Dame, and it's never had both Bueckers and Azzi Fudd available for those.
Wild stats, right? I mean, I saw that too. It's kind of incredible, but it's kind of tragic at the same time, right? It just goes to show how injury-ridden in the history of Paige and Azzi together. It almost feels like star-crossed. It's tough because how could they never have not played at the same time on this floor? But they also learned pretty quickly that it's a road game is different than neutral site, right? The Greensboro game, which I'll talk about later in the program, I was there. The atmosphere was fantastic, but it was a lot of pro UConn too. So there was none of that last night.
Yeah. And, looking ahead, UConn still has to play USC coming up in 8 days now. And then also later in the season, South Carolina. What do you hope that they take away from such a big non-conference game into those later non-conference games that they still have coming up?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one because it's going to all rely on how they react to this loss, right? I thought Sarah Strong was good last night. She wasn't her typical self and of what we've become accustomed to, of essentially being as impactful, if not more impactful than Paige on a day-to-day basis. And she kind of looked like a freshman last night that was just good versus generational. And I think a part of that is because when you don't have Azzi and you don't have that third scorer, you don't have that threat on the outside, everything gets congested. So she didn't have a lot of room to blow by her opponent. The spacing was terrible. And all of it's because they don't respect Ashlyn Shade's jump shot. They don't respect KK Arnold from shooting threes. But if you have Azzi out there, all of a sudden everything opens up. So it's either she comes back full strength, which is tenuous at best, or one of the others steps up, whether that be a freshman that hasn't stepped up yet, like Morgan Shelley or Ali Zabal. I'm hoping Ashlyn Shade just had a blip on the radar screen. But last night she had a tough night.
Awesome. Well, coming up next, we'll chat about UConn season so far. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. So, our listeners are unfortunately familiar with this next question because I ask the next Big East writer, T. Baker, it every time they're on the show. What's the injury update for UConn?
Yes, I almost feel like I should take my hat off for this one and just kind of hold it over my heart to talk about it. Caroline Ducharme is day-to-day, which is increasingly sounding like they don't know. Gino and the staff, they don't know whether she's going to play this year because it's a head injury, it's a neck injury. I don't think they want to play with it. Again, that's what we're getting day-to-day. Ayanna Patterson is in a sling. UConn is nearing a decision on whether she's going to need surgery on her shoulder, as reported by Daniel Connolly of UConn's Women's College Basketball Daily or Weekly. Pardon me. If that happens, she'll be out for the rest of the season. As Gino put it, the kid can't catch a break. I agree with him there. Aubrey Griffin is close. She's participating in warmups at games, but not quite ready to be fully active. Kind of similar to what we saw with Azzi before she was fully ready, but now she's back and she's day to day with a knee sprain. That's the update. I'll put my hat back on.
One day I will have somebody on talking about UConn, and that injury update will either not be as long or not be necessary. But unfortunately, that's not the case right now. So you've talked about a lot of people. Overall, looking at the season so far, the last month and a half, who stood out to you the most?
It's Sarah Strong. She's so much more than anyone could have expected. I know she's been the number one recruit in the country. So that's kind of maybe an oxymoron, but she's got a little bit of everything. She's got Maya's frame. She's got a little bit of, and Gino's put this on her, not me. She's got Stewie's production as a freshman through 9 games. She can shoot it. She can drive. She's a great passer. But I think the most, and Rebecca Lobo said it last night, and I've said it on my show, she has incredible pace. Like, she doesn't move too quick. Like, Janelle Alfie is a great example, has all the talent in the world, but feels like she's trying to score 20 points every possession. She goes too fast. Like, Sarah just doesn't have that. And up until last night, I felt like she was the most impactful player on the team. I don't think that'll stop. And I think Notre Dame didn't have answers for her when she did not hinder herself with some early foul trouble. So she has been absolutely the most impressive person that has stood out this season.
And, how do you think that'll impact the team as the season continues to have such an impactful freshman learning so much, when it comes time to play those big non-conference games later in the season, and then also, once March Madness rolls around? I know we're looking ahead, but it's hard not to be asking those questions right now.
Yeah, I think it's all a good thing. I think Sarah's personality is perfect for what the situation is. If this team was perfectly placed with AZ 100% healthy, Aubrey, Caroline, everything, she'd still be Sarah Strong and she'd still be as impactful. She'd probably have about 10 assists a game because there's other options. But she's and Gino said this early, her role is a blank canvas. She can pretty much do whatever she wants on the court. So it's really up to her. And I think she's starting to really assert herself. And that's good because even though Gino's screaming for Paige to be more assertive and be more aggressive, it's good for her to have a player like Sarah that can pretty much do it all. But I do think going forward, Paige and Sarah the offense has to be run through Paige and Sarah exclusively until AZ comes back or until someone can prove they can knock down shots consistently.
And then maybe aside from Sarah Strong, what newcomer has made the biggest impact?
Oh, that's a tough one outside of Sarah. Can we say AZ because she hasn't been around for a while? I know she's not a newcomer, but God, that's such a tough. I think Morgan Shelley, if you're going to talk about one of the freshmen, has gotten the most run because she's 6'2" and she can do a little bit of everything. But even her last night, it felt very like she wasn't ready for that Notre Dame game. I mean, she got on the break a couple times and fell down, and no disrespect to her, she's going to be a good player, but she's just not quite ready to take that step and play meaningful minutes. There really hasn't been anyone else other than Sarah that you could say. Caitlin Chen as a transfer, you could definitely put her in the mix. I'm sorry, I'm kind of forgetting that she's a newbie because she's older. But yeah, I mean, I guess outside of Sarah, you'd have to go Caitlin Chen.
And then, I know this is kind of going back to what we were talking about last segment, but, you talk about getting minutes and experience. How do you think that experience against Notre Dame, even though it was a loss, will help UConn, as the season continues and, all the strenuous things of the season continue?
I think it's great. I know that sounds silly because everyone, I'm sitting here in my UConn shirt and I was frustrated last night. But I think when I put my analyst hat on and think about like what the coaches want, do they want to go undefeated? Sure. I have a UConn home field shirt that's a 39-0, t-shirt that I have. That's great. And we've had multiple, I think 6 undefeated seasons. I don't think that's ever going to happen again. I don't think an undefeated season is going to happen in women's college basketball quite as often, even though I know South Carolina just did it last year, because you learn more from losses than you do from winning. And there's so much more parity now that it's just harder to do. And I think this team is going to learn from it. And if they don't, then the more losses are going to come. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You either take your loss and learn, or you take your loss and continue to repeat the same issues that we had last night, which is the defensive issues, lack of rebounding. We didn't box out very well last night. So it's going to be an interesting rest of the year because there's a lot more challenges, right? Even before Christmas, the next 8 days.
Yeah. And then, if you had to describe this UConn season in one word so far, what would it be and why?
Tenuous, because this team has the talent and the players to win a title, but it's teetering on a cliff, and that cliff of injuries, not having enough. It's not about not having enough talent. It's about who's available. We've talked on our show about Azzi and how this team was when you saw it against Louisville. They were a wagon, and she creates not only a plus scorer, but like a psychological advantage that Notre Dame didn't have to deal with. If Azzi's out there, I talked about it earlier in the show here, Sarah gets more breathing room. Paige has more breathing room. It's a trickle-down effect. Until one of the freshmen steps up or opens up the three-point shooting floodgates, Azzi comes back full strength. This season's title hopes are tenuous at best.
And then, I assume I know what you're going to say based on what you said in your intro, but, what's been your favorite part of the season so far to watch?
Selfishly, it was getting to go, because I live in Greensboro. So they played Carolina in the First Horizons, formerly known as the Greensboro Coliseum. So I got to cover it. I got to personally ask Gino some questions, Sarah, Paige. So I'll be selfish with that. It was 100% my favorite part of the season. The atmosphere in Greensboro was electric. It was a Friday at like 5:30, 6 o'clock. There was 11,000 people there. It felt very. It was awesome to be a part of it. It's the first time I've ever seen Paige Bueckers in person, so I think that was a cool moment for me. And I got to ask Gino a really cool question that he laughed at, and it got picked up a few times. And I asked him which is more impressive, Chris Daly's 17-0 interim coaching record, or his 1,217 wins, or whatever it was. And he kind of laughed and said, "Well, if you ask her, she'd probably say her record because it's got a better percentage." So I wanted to give him something other than what everyone was saying, which is how do you feel about this? I wanted to give him a chance to opine, and he did. He didn't disappoint.
Yeah, I was there to cover the 1,200, the win number 1,217, and that was definitely quite a night. From the pre-celebration, just celebrating
Sure.
Chris Daly and him 40 years at UConn, to then also, bringing out the GOAT at the end, can't forget about all those things. And he definitely got some of those questions. I think one clip that went viral was, or maybe not viral, but, was circulating the internet, was somebody asked him about Chris Daly, and he was like, "What about everything that Chris Daly has done for me?"
That reporter, whoever asked that question, I don't know if it was you or somebody else, but you can thank me for him turning that around, because I think the game before, I gave him the opening to talk about how much she's meant to him, and then everyone asked that same similar question, and he was like, you know what? How about what she means to me, or how about how much I mean to her? So he's a gem. He's one of one.
Definitely. Yeah, I didn't ask that question, but it was definitely one of my favorite answers in that press conference. Well, coming up next, we'll look ahead to Big East play as well as the rest of the season for the Huskies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. The college basketball season is upon us, but you can also bet on who will win the WNBA championship in 2025 and who will win the WNBA regular season MVP in 2025 as well, all at FanDuel.com. So UConn opens up conference play on Sunday with a Big East championship game rematch against Georgetown. What should fans be looking for in that matchup?
I'm gonna make a joke here. That, like, vengeance. Like, they are. I can't imagine they're gonna be super excited to play. I think we're gonna see an angry pack of Huskies in this one. They'll have to deal with another tough guard duo in Kelsey Ransom and Victoria Rivera, both averaging 21 and 13 respectively. But I don't see this as a difficult game for UConn. Georgetown just lost to George Mason. I don't think it's going to present a challenge with Azzi or not. But I do think this team is going to come out and act as if they're playing South Carolina, because Gino's going to demand it, and they have to show it. Like, I think there's been too many games where they play a opponent that shouldn't say they should be on the same court, but that they're better than, that they kind of let hang around. And I think that that's something that is going to be what you can watch for. If they get out to a quick start, I think some of the issues have been quelled. If they let Georgetown hang around for longer than a quarter or two, then the same issues persist.
And then kind of zooming out a little bit, what should we be expecting from UConn in conference play in general?
Honestly, I don't say this gleefully. I think it's a break. I think there's not as much of tough conference play this year. It's one of the reasons why UConn's playing one of the tougher non-conference slates, and they do it almost every year, because the Big East isn't as challenging, and I don't think it's going to challenge them much this year. I think Creighton was ranked, but I don't know. I feel like they're not as on as they were last year. And I just mentioned about the Georgetown game. You have a couple players that you have to worry about, but there's not the amount of talent. Like, for example, to like zoom out to like Notre Dame. I didn't think Leah King was going to have a career night last night. Like, there's multiple opportunities when you play these top 10 teams, and unfortunately, the Big East just doesn't have very many.
And then, zooming out even further, what game are you most looking forward to the rest of this season?
Yeah, this is a predictable one. I think the South Carolina game is also, it's because I'm close to South Carolina, so I will be driving down to cover it. So that's another selfish moment for me, but also because by that point in the season, we'll have a much clearer picture if we can hang with the defending champs. What are the prospects of us winning a 12th national title? Is Azzi 100% ready to go? Will we have Aubrey Griffin back? Is Ayanna Patterson going to have surgery, or is she going to be able to rehab enough to be available in this game? So, again, you'll have a much clearer picture of whether or not this team is a legit national title contender, or if it's going to be a tough game for them in Columbia.
Well, I mean, I guess that probably answers my next question, but I'll give you a chance to answer it anyway. With the new year right around the corner, what excites you about UConn in 2025?
Yeah, I think there's some hope and some optimism. I know some of the answers I've given probably give a negative, but it's also coming a day after a loss. But, I think if we have a full strength Azzi Fudd, Aubrey Griffin, Sarah Strong continues to be dominant. I'd love to see. I mean, I shudder to think what Sarah Strong is going to look like as a senior. But just think about how exponentially she gets better from month to month. She tries to get better every game. So where is she going to be in January 13th? A month from now. So I think if we can start to accelerate her progress, Paige starts to potentially lean on that aggression that Gino wants. These are things it's like a Christmas wish list. These are the things I'm hoping for. I guess my New Year's resolution is everything comes together. And I hope that is for Husky Nation, but also for the women. I talked about this. I did a whole show about how Azzi, her mental health has to be so damaged by all of these setbacks and injuries. So I'm just hoping that her, Aubrey, even Caroline can come back in some capacity and help this team get to a Final Four and a national championship.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can the people find you and your work?
Listen, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. You can find all of our podcasts on YouTube, Locked on UConn. Subscribe to the channel there, as well as on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I just have to mention something that is very near and dear to my heart. We donate 10% of our revenue, all the money we get from the podcast, ad revenue and et cetera. We donate 10% to Husky Ticket Project. And if you're not familiar with who they are, it's a nonprofit organization founded by 3 UConn alumni in 2018. They send underserved, underprivileged communities with tickets to UConn sporting events. So that's women's and men's basketball, football, baseball, and softball in the spring. I think sometimes they do some soccer. So by supporting Locked on UConn, you're indirectly supporting a great cause that we're really proud to champion.
Well, that's an even better reason to keep listening to Locked on UConn. Well, thank you again. And thanks to our listeners for making us your first listen every day. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked on NBA Daily Newsletter. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked on NBA newsletter. And make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA draft crew.